Welcome back to Turkish Spotlight Secrets, the place where we pull back the velvet rope and sit with the truths most people whisper only to themselves. If you treasure unfiltered stories and sincere confessions, subscribe, hit join to support us, and tap like and comment. Your voice keeps this conversation alive. Under a mellow, lived-in light that made the room look less like a set and more like a refuge, Demet Özdemir finally chose to speak without ornament or armor. It wasn't a press conference, it sounded like a letter she had owed herself for too long. She described a love she still names plainly. Yaman was, in her own reckoning, the singular love of her life. The admission did not arrive like a complaint or a door slammed shut. It felt closer to a truth that had settled quietly, the kind you only recognize once you've learned to sit still with your ache. Her voice, sometimes hovering just above a whisper, carried the experience of someone who had navigated longing so intense it left its own geography inside her. It is one thing to mark a romance's past, another to admit that it remains the axis around which your private constellations still turn. Demet refused to dress the memory in excess or self-pity. She spoke of paradox instead, how a connection that burned from both ends could both ignite your life and leave deliberate scorch marks. She did not narrate a single blaze. She described a long, contradicting flame, one that warmed her to possibility while writing its story on her skin. I loved him with everything I had, she said, pausing as if to find a word that wouldn't cheapen what had been real. It wasn't perfect. It was complicated, sometimes impossible. But every flaw felt like proof that it was true. When asked if she had ever located that same depth again, her answer was unambiguous, no. She didn't say this to canonize pain or to build a martyrdom, she said it because authenticity, once lived that intensely, refuses duplication. It is not arrogance. It is an accounting of what the heart knows. Pause with me for a second, dear viewers. Do you think one love can script the contours of an entire life? Tell us below. And if you're moved by these intimate talks, support the work by hitting join. It keeps Turkish Spotlight Secrets independent and brave enough to bring you stories that breathe. After the very public unraveling of her relationship with Can, Demet stepped away. Not dramatically, she simply stopped showing up in the places that feed speculation. No red carpets for the sake of being seen. No late-night negotiations with paparazzi. No hungry scroll through comments. She chose quiet and stayed there. Those months were not empty. They were a form of labor. She rebuilt her evenings around the sea, letting the tide decide the tempo of her thoughts. She filled notebooks with sentences she didn't expect anyone to read. She borrowed strength from family who knew her before the billboards. She walked, long, aimless walks that let her return to herself slowly, like a tide coming in. Her silence was not evasion, it was rehab for the parts of her that had been carrying too much. I needed to recognize myself outside the outline of someone else, she confessed. The idea is familiar, but she gave it a clarity that felt earned. When devotion begins to direct every step, sacrifices that once felt noble can hollow you out. She had become so good at choosing what was good for the couple that she forgot to ask what was necessary for Demet. By the time she noticed, the hollow was not dramatic, it was subtle, a steady subtraction. She still keeps certain objects. A stack of letters smudged with sea air from places where Can was filming abroad. Photos that were passed among friends before they ever reached the internet. Little talismans, tucked into a plain box that doesn't announce itself. She revisits songs they used to cue before stepping on set together, the playlist that steadied their breath before the camera rolled. The melodies don't only pull her towards sadness, sometimes they dial in the frequency of who she used to be. Those keepsakes and those songs testify to capacity, to feel freely, to commit fully, to be moved by something larger than strategy. Demet doesn't sanitize what came afterward. Opportunities fell through. Some friendships turned uncertain under the pressure of gossip economies that feed on anyone who loves visibly. There were nights in a full apartment that still felt empty, because the person who once stood as home was no longer at the door. But she refuses to name all this loss as ruin. Certain losses, she insists, teach. Rebuilding her career, or, more precisely, redecorating it from the inside, was painful, deliberate, necessary. The muscle of resilience does not grow in applause, it develops in quiet repetition. Critics have begun to point to something different in her recent work. In scenes where a lesser actor might reach for practiced gestures, Demet often looks like she's not acting at all but listening, inhabiting. "There's a plain honesty now," one reviewer wrote, as if her character's breath belongs to her. Demet accepts that with both pride and humility. This honesty, she believes, was bestowed by pain, an unwanted tutor, but a meticulous one. She rejects the suggestion that she is waiting for a grand reconciliation. There's no superstition in her pockets, no daily bargaining with fate. What she carries is a calm openness. "If our paths cross again, I won't run," she acknowledged. "I'm done wearing bitterness like armor." Those sentences contain something rare, a farewell that honors gratitude. She refuses to compress their history into a triumphalist myth or a warning label. She names it as formative, a chapter that changed the architecture of her being. For women who have loved with their whole selves under a spotlight that magnifies every misstep, Demet's stance is instructive. Vulnerability is not a synonym for doom. It can be a map to self-knowledge. None of this is performed. It is practical compassion, toward herself and toward the man she loved. She recognizes the dual nature of love, the way it can build and undo, heal and wound, sharpen and soften. "I was shaped by it," she said. "And I remain grateful." She also addressed the chorus of critics who catalogued her choices, especially the jobs she declined because companionship, travel, or simply showing up for a partner mattered more at the time. She didn't excuse every decision. She contextualized them. "I chose connection," she said simply. At that moment, it felt larger than the numbers on a contract. She accepts the consequence, rebuilding later, re-earning trust, restating ambition. That, to her, is not failure. It's the price of being human. That price included what she called an emotional homelessness in the aftermath, the vertigo of losing a place that had functioned as home. When two people have been each other's refuge, the end is not just a breakup. It's an evacuation. Rooms stay the same, but their temperature changes. From that emptiness, she began a reclamation, slow, daily, gentle. She practiced belonging to herself, then to her work, then to the present moment. She stopped measuring her life by what she had lost and started measuring it by what she could cultivate again. Her posture toward future love reflects this rebuilt autonomy. She does not keep affection at the door, but she now insists on parity. "I'm not looking for someone to complete me," she said. "Whoever enters my life should walk beside me, not ahead, not behind." Call it a boundary or a manifesto, it's both. It's a standard that places agency and equality at the center, not as a line in a caption but as a practiced habit. She offered, too, a meditation on education, not the kind a classroom supplies, but the kind experience writes into your nerves. Heartbreak, she said, is a teacher that doesn't waste ink. Love is both tutor and test, study and exam. Some lessons cannot be delivered by anyone else's story, the heart has to learn them by living. It prepared me, she reflected, for subtleties I couldn't have understood any other way. Of course, the story cannot be told from one side. People close to can note that he rarely speaks about the past and that his way of protecting what mattered is to keep it unpublic. Distance, they say, was not the villain but the pressure that came with distance. Careers that multiplied, schedules that mocked planning, continents that turned simple moments into logistics. When you love with the world watching, even ordinary affection becomes choreography. They both tried to keep the dance human. There were rituals, phone calls at impossible hours, shared photos of the same moon, prayers said at different windows. There were fights that only looked dramatic in headlines but felt ordinary in kitchens. There were apologies that arrived late and gestures that arrived early. There were days when love felt like an effortless collaboration and days when it felt like an exquisite burden. None of it was fake. All of it was alive. Demet told the interviewer that she doesn't want to rewrite history to suit a cleaner narrative. She would rather tell the mess with respect than package the truth to look pretty. We were two ambitious people trying to be soft, she said. Sometimes we were. Sometimes we weren't. What mattered, even now, was acknowledging that the love shaped them in ways neither anticipated. In quiet moments, she remembers not just grand scenes but small mercies, a hand that didn't let go when the elevator doors tried to close, an espresso left on a script, a jacket placed over her shoulders at dawn. The industry kept moving as they untangled their lives. Offers landed on desks. Flights were booked. Cameras reset. Demet said she learned to say no without apology and yes without fear, a skill she attributes to surviving the loss of something she thought would be permanent. She met with directors who didn't want her heartbreak on screen so much as the truth it had taught her. She became more selective without becoming cynical. She stopped auditioning for affection. And yet, amid all that determination, she kept affection for the past unashamed and unspent. Not a longing to rekindle. A willingness to remember tenderly. To say thank you without asking for a return. To accept that some loves are not meant to be finished, they're meant to be carried. She can laugh now at scenes that once made her cry and cry at memories that once made her laugh. Grief isn't a straight road. Neither is gratitude. Dear audience, what did you carry from Demet's confession? Do you believe certain loves etch themselves into us permanently, or is the heart an endless student, always able to learn again? Tell us in the comments, your stories belong here. If this deep dive moved you, support independent storytelling by liking, subscribing, and clicking join for special content. Your engagement enables Turkish Spotlight Secrets to remain a space where famous names become human and headlines are translated back into lived experience. As we close, remember the quiet treasures she spoke of, a box of mementos that don't ask for permission to exist, a playlist that knows the rhythm of an old breath, the courage to let gratitude outlast regret. She isn't waiting by a window. She isn't slamming any doors. She's learning that dignity and softness can travel together, that honoring the past doesn't mean abandoning the present, and that the work of becoming is worth every measured step. We'll be here to keep listening. To the stories that remind us that the people we watch on screens build, break, rebuild, and keep going, just like the rest of us. Thank you for staying with us through this intimate conversation. Like the video if you felt seen. Subscribe if you're new to the community. Press join if you want to support more interviews and unfiltered narratives. Turkish Spotlight Secrets will return with more stories that rehumanize the names we think we know. Until then, guard your heart, honor your past, and trust the slow, steady work of becoming.